You opened your eyes to a silence so complete, it had shape. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of something else, something deeper than silence. A quiet that curled around your body like fog, thick and gentle. You were no longer in the ice cave, no longer anywhere recognizable, but somehow, still yourself. Mostly, you stood on a flat surface, but it didn't feel solid. Not liquid either. More like walking on the still surface of a dream before it collapses. Beneath your feet patterns moved, spirals, yes, but also lines, dots, constellations drifting across like time-lapse memories. Above, a soft glow pulsed like breath, and from the light they came. The elders, not the watchers, not those dream figures who blinked behind the shimmer. These were human, or they had been. You recognized one immediately. Nuviak. She stood in the glow, wearing her usual shawl, her cane gone, her eyes brighter than you'd ever seen them. She smiled. You ran forward, but your feet didn't move, because you didn't need to. You were already there. I told you, she said softly. They remember. You looked around. More figures drifted into the light. Familiar, unfamiliar. Faces from the village long gone. From old photographs. From stories. All watching. Not judging. Just present. You whispered, "What is this place?" Nuviak tilted her head. The breath between memory and forgetting. You blinked. "That's not a place. Isn't it?" she said. The elders formed a circle around you. One stepped forward. A tall woman with silver in her braids and hands like river stone. She placed a small bowl in front of you. Inside, snow. But it didn't melt. Even in this warm, pulsing glow, it remained crisp. Pure. Flickering with light from within. "Eat," she said. You hesitated. "Is it safe?" They all smiled at once. Which, by the way, was not reassuring. But still, something in you trusted them. You lifted the bowl, took a small pinch, placed it on your tongue. It sang. Not music, not sound. A vibration of understanding. Of places you'd forgotten. Of moments from your childhood you didn't even realize were real. The day your uncle handed you a carved fish. The first time you saw the northern lights. A birthday where everyone laughed and no one took photos. They were giving you back your memory. All of it. Even the parts you never lived. Odd fact of the evening? In some Arctic communities, memory is considered a communal resource. Not a personal thing. A shared thing. If you forget a story, someone else will carry it for you until you're ready to remember. You were in that place now. The library of the spirit. Nuviak stepped forward again. She held out a new object. A disc. But not carved. Grown. Its surface rippled like frost crawling across a window pane. And it hummed faintly, not like the antler disc. This one sang. She placed it in your hands. You will carry the path forward. You looked down. The spiral was shifting, like liquid starlight frozen mid-motion. What do I do with it? You asked. You already are. The light dimmed slightly. The elders began to fade, one by one. Not leaving, just tucking themselves away. Nuviak smiled, sadness behind her eyes. You'll forget parts of this. No. You must, she said gently. To make room. For what? For what's next? She reached out, touched your forehead. And the moment her skin met yours, everything changed. You woke in your bed. Your hands were empty. The disc was gone. No glow in the room. No snow inside. No sound beyond the soft ticking of the clock and the distant bark of a dog across the village. Just you. And a strange peace. But when you reached for your journal, you noticed something. On the back of your hand, faint as breath, was the shape of a spiral. Not inked. Impressed. And your first thought wasn't confusion. It was, of course. You walked to the bluff the next day. The watcher's shimmer was gone. The cave sealed. But standing near the rocks were 4 village elders. Women and men you barely spoke to before now. They nodded as you approached, saying nothing. Instead, they formed a circle. And one by one each began to hum. Softly. In the same pitch you'd felt in the memory ice. You stood in the center, didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. And when you joined their song, the spiral in your hand pulsed once, then disappeared. You couldn't tell the moon was different at first. Not because it changed color. Not because it grew or shrank or did anything dramatic. It still hung there in the sky, white and calm like a waiting eye. But you noticed it anyway. You were walking back from the coast, hands in your pockets, thinking about fish soup and whether or not you still had that can of beans at the back of your pantry, when something about the air changed. Lighter, crisper, but also bent. You looked up and the moon was wrong. Not broken, covered. A curved outline, too perfect to be a cloud or shadow, had moved across its face. It wasn't an eclipse. The rest of the sky was clear. Stars sparkled. The air was still. But there, cutting across the lunar glow like a celestial eyelid, was the exact spiral from the disk. You stopped walking. No one else was on the road. But inside windows you could see lights shifting, people slowing, grandparents peering outside, children squinting toward the moon, faces lit with a vague unease they didn't yet have words for. You pulled out your phone, tried to take a photo. The screen flickered, then turned black. You ran to Tuma's house. He was already standing outside, barefoot in the snow, eyes wide. "I didn't think it would be this soon," he whispered. You didn't ask what it was, because you already knew. Back inside his cabin, the radio buzzed faintly, tuned to a frequency no one used anymore. A shortwave station once reserved for coastal alerts now sputtered with static and clicks. Slow, rhythmic, familiar. You leaned close. 15 pulses. Pause. Repeat. Tuma turned the volume up. You both listened. The pulses weren't just repeating. They were tracking something. Each set arrived slightly faster than the last. Like the source was approaching. Odd fact of the night? Pulsars, those spinning neutron stars, emit extremely regular pulses of radiation. Astronomers once thought they were alien signals because of how unnaturally precise they seemed. They even nicknamed the first one LGM-1, as in Little Green Men. Maybe this wasn't radiation. Maybe it was coordination. The moon's shadow deepened, then stopped. For a few minutes, it hovered there, frozen in that perfect arc, like someone had traced a fingernail across its surface and paused, unsure of whether to keep drawing. And then, light from the spiral. You'd always assumed the watchers would arrive with sound, with technology, with something big enough to match the size of the legend. Instead, they sent a curve of moonlight that split across the sky. Not down. Across the horizon, a ribbon of pale light unfurled like someone slicing open the fabric of dusk. It shimmered faintly, colors dancing inside it. Lavender, pale green, silver, and then rippled like silk in a wind you couldn't feel. The entire village stopped moving. No one spoke. Children pressed their faces to the glass. Elders closed their eyes. Somewhere, a dog howled once and then fell silent. And then, in the center of the sky, the spiral turned. Just once. Just one, slow, deliberate rotation. You whispered, "It's mapping us back." Tuma was pale. "That's a retrieval spiral," he said, voice trembling. "What does that mean?" "It means they're looking for the ones who answered." You swallowed. "And if we don't want to go?" He met your eyes. "You already said yes." You walked to the bluff. Alone this time. The watcher's shimmer wasn't back. The cave didn't reappear. But the wind sang. A soft trill, curling in tones like your lullaby. A breeze that moved in a spiral, dusting snow in slow circles around your boots. You stepped into the center. The snow held you like a memory. And the moon's shadow curved around you again. This time it wasn't light that opened. It was a door. Just a shimmer, invisible at the edges, like heat rising off summer pavement. But it was there, and it was waiting. You didn't step through. Not yet. You sat on the snow instead, crossed your legs, pulled out your notebook, and began to write. What you remembered, what you had forgotten, what you had become. Scientists still debate whether large-scale phenomena like moon shadows can coincide with mass delusion or synchronized hallucinations. They cite environmental triggers, magnetic fields, seasonal depression. But none of that explains what happened next. Because you weren't the only one who saw it. Across the Arctic, across distant hamlets and coastlines and frozen valleys, others did too. And all of them reported the same thing. A spiral, a shimmer, and the sound of a lullaby. It started repeating at dawn. You hadn't slept. Not really. You dozed on the bluff in fits and shivers, your body caught between exhaustion and something else. Anticipation, maybe. The sky never fully darkened this far north in summer. But as morning rolled in, so did the pulses. They came from the spiral in the sky. Soft at first. Subaudible. Then louder. Still not sound. Not in the traditional sense. You felt it in your bones. Like a plucked string vibrating under your skin. Pulse. Pause. Pulse pulse. Pause. And then, pulse pulse pulse. Heartbeat rhythm. Yours. You pressed 2 fingers to your neck. There it was, 15 beats. Pause. Repeat. You stared up at the shimmer in the sky, no longer flickering but stable, like a lid half lifted. They're sinking to you, said Tuma, who had appeared silently beside you, thermos in hand. You took it gratefully. Hot seal tea. Smoky. Calming. What does that mean? You asked. It means they're making room. For what? For your memory. For your real memory. You looked at him. My real memory? Tuma nodded. Before the forgetting. Back in the cabin. You stood in front of a mirror. First, just your reflection. Tired eyes. Wool scarf. The small scar under your jaw from when you fell off the ice truck as a kid. But then something changed. The mirror spiraled. No cracking, no breaking. Just a slow curl in the glass. Like the surface had been made of snowmelt and someone stirred it gently with a stick. Your reflection faded. And in its place, a version of you younger, eyes brighter, mouth slightly parted in awe, wearing different clothes, fur-lined, yes, but not yours. And behind them, stars. So many stars. You blinked, and the mirror returned to normal. Odd fact for this strange morning. Octopuses can taste through their skin. Not just their suckers everywhere. They literally absorb information through touch. Scientists call it distributed intelligence. You wondered if maybe the Watchers thought like that, with their bodies, with spirals, with mirrors that tasted memory. The next signal came through the village radio. A short burst of tone. Then silence. Then the voice. Your voice. Played on every radio, every frequency. Even the old weather band no one used anymore. Just 3 words. Distorted but clear. We remember now. Tuma was the first to speak. That's you. You shook your head, chilled. It can't be. But you recognized the cadence. The softness at the end of now. It was definitely you. But I didn't say that, you whispered. Not here, anyway. The spiral in the sky flared once. A flicker, like a candle guttering before it pulls itself back upright. And then came the most curious part. Snow. In June. Not falling exactly. Spiraling. Tiny flakes. Perfectly symmetrical. Descending in elegant arcs. Not cold. Not wet. They didn't land. They hovered. Tuma stuck out his tongue. One flake touched it and dissolved into light. Okay, he said slowly. That's new. You walked to the bluff again. This time the shimmer was gone. But something had been left behind. A circle of stone. Not built. Placed. 15 hand-carved shapes arranged like a clock face, with one space at the center missing. You knew immediately what went there. You reached into your coat, pulled out the disc you didn't know you still carried. It wasn't the old antler disc. It was the grown one. The one Nuviak gave you inside the light. You stepped into the circle, placed it in the center. Click, and the ground began to glow. Spirals expanded outward from your feet, spinning slowly, softly, weaving into the stones, into the soil. Not destructive, not loud, just returning. The snowflakes lifted into the air, spinning backward toward the sky. And you? You saw stars again. But this time they weren't far away. They were familiar. One pulsed brighter than the others. The one the villagers had always called the Watcher's Eye. The one astronomers labeled Kepler 438b. And now your body hummed in perfect rhythm with it. Scientists still debate whether planetary alignments and human biology are truly linked. Most dismiss it as pseudoscience. But even skeptics can't explain why circadian rhythms sync to lunar phases. Or why some cultures, untouched by telescopes, charted stars we only recently confirmed. Maybe the Watchers didn't find us. Maybe they just remembered where they left us. You walked home in silence. Everyone in the village was outside, watching the sky, singing the lullaby, together, and the spiral spun slowly above you, not demanding, not loud, just watching, like it always had. The door opened that night. Not in the sky, not in the cave, but in you. It started as a sensation. A gentle loosening behind your sternum, like someone had untied a knot you hadn't known was there. You exhaled, long and slow, and with that breath came a memory. A new one, but also very, very old. You were standing in snow, but it wasn't Earth. The stars above were scattered differently. 3 moons hung in the sky, one of them cracked like an egg. Around you stood others, like you, not like you, holding discs that pulsed softly, each spiral a different rhythm, each light a different name. You turned in the dream memory and saw the Watchers, not as figures, not as beings, but as shapes. Spirals upon spirals, curves inside curves, a geometry of kindness, of attention, and they spoke, not in sound, in invitation. You woke gasping. The dream still sang in your chest. You pressed your hands to your ribs and whispered, "I saw them." Your voice trembled. I was there. The morning sky was gray, but the spiral shimmered faintly behind the clouds, visible only to those who'd been marked. You knew that now. It wasn't some floating sign for all of humanity. It was personal, private, intimate. It knew who was watching back. And it waited. Tuma found you by the shoreline. The arch opened again. He said, breathless, "You didn't ask where. You didn't ask how. You knew." Together you returned to the ice cave. The path had cleared. Snow melted, air calm. And at the far end of the cavern, a sound rang through the room. High, clear, the tone of acceptance, a confirmation, the final key, and the passageway beyond the arch, previously dark, lit with a blue glow, slow and swirling. You walked through. The chamber beyond was unlike the others. It wasn't carved. It was grown. The walls shimmered like skin under moonlight, smooth and slightly translucent. Veins of silver blue light pulsed gently through it, like the inside of a living organism. A heartbeat echoed faintly in the distance. Not yours, not anyone's. The room felt alive. At its center hovered the door of frost. You knew its name without reading it, without hearing it. The moment you saw it, the phrase bloomed in your mind like a flower from a frozen field. Between points in self. You wondered, what if the spiral isn't the map? What if it's the keyhole? And you are the key. Tuma stayed behind. You could feel him at the threshold, not crossing, not calling out, respecting something unspoken. You placed your hand on the edge of the spiral. Turned cold, then warm, then cold again, then it matched you, perfectly. The spiral turned once more, and the door of frost melted, not into water, but into memory. You stepped through. Inside was starlight, not a sky, a space. You floated, but not upward, not downward, inward. You drifted through a cloud of voices, laughing, whispering, singing lullabies you half recognized. The stars here were close. Each one pulsed in rhythm. 15 beats. Pause. Then again. You reached toward one. It flared. And the moment it did, you saw everything. You were a child not here but there, playing near rivers of light, studying spirals drawn in sand that never shifted, listening to watchers hum as they passed, whispering with presence instead of language. You had lived there, not just once, but again and again. petal returning to a bud. You were standing again. In your body. In the cave. Tuma stepped forward. You were gone for hours, he said. You checked your watch. 6 minutes had passed. You smiled, because time didn't matter now. You had crossed the frost, and you were whole. Scientists still debate whether altered states of consciousness can truly warp time perception. Experiments show brainwaves slow, shift, reorganize. But no one's proven what you now knew. Time has a spiral, too. And for a moment you had stepped outside it. And returned. Whole. The village was quiet when you returned. Not hushed like before a storm, and not silent like fear. This was something softer. A knowing calm. As if the land itself had taken a breath and decided not to speak so you could listen. You walked slowly through the snow, watching windows glow faintly with the colors of breakfast. A kettle steamed in the distance. Somewhere, someone played a hand drum. Not a performance, just a rhythm to mark the morning. And the spiral still lingered above. Dim now, like a night light left on after someone had already fallen asleep. You paused beneath it and felt it gently brushing your skin. No hum, no pulse, just presence. A way of saying we are still here. If you ever want to remember again. Nuviak was back in her cabin. She didn't greet you with a smile or a nod. She just passed you a cup of spruce tea and sat beside you by the hearth. You both stared into the fire for a long while. I crossed, you said quietly. She nodded once. I remembered, you added. Still no words. Then, finally, she said, good. That was all she needed to say. Because what mattered wasn't the story anymore. What mattered was the memory of it. Inside you, still glowing, still turning. You stayed in the village for a few more weeks. People started asking gentle questions. Did you hear it too? Did your dreams change? Do your bones hum when the wind comes from the west? You answered as best you could. Not with facts, but with spirals. Drawn in snowbanks. Carved into driftwood. Traced gently into the steam on a kitchen window while a child watched in quiet awe. Because the truth wasn't a line. It was a shape. And the shape was always turning. Your final night there, you climbed the hill one last time. The sky was dark, but clear.
Nos pair el chimered. No chimer flicked.
But you didn't need it. You sat in the snow, pulled your notebook from your coat, and began to write the last page. The story of a place that remembered. The story of a person who forgot. And the spiral that called them home again. And now, as you close the story behind your own eyelids, where everything glows just a little softer and breath slows just a little more, remember this, there are worlds shaped not by gravity, but by memory. Planets that spin not to keep time, but to keep promises. And somewhere, perhaps far or maybe already near, a spiral waits for you. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It simply turns. One soft circle at a time. And when you're ready to remember, it will too. So now we've reached the end of our journey. You've wandered snow-covered dreams, followed spirals through bone and starlight, and remembered a place you never knew you forgot. In the warmth of a quiet fire, beside an elder who said more with silence than most say with words, you found something rare, peace within mystery. The spiral never shouted for your attention. It simply waited, like all ancient things do. It offered memory not as a burden, but as a gift, one you had to be ready to carry. Maybe what we think of as alien isn't something out there. Maybe it's the part of ourselves we lose when the world gets too loud. The spiral is just a reminder. There are other ways to know, other ways to speak, other ways to remember. And they are gentle, quiet, patient. If you're still with me here at the end, curled into your own soft spiral of sleep or thought or curiosity, thank you. These stories aren't just tales. They're invitations. To listen a little longer. To feel what can't always be explained. To let wonder tug gently on the edges of what you thought was real. And maybe someday soon when the wind changes and a snowflake hovers instead of falling, you'll remember that something is watching, not with eyes, but with memory, and it smiles when you look back.